Welcome back to the Who's Reality Cooking podcast. I'm so excited to have Harold Sims from Cooking with Cannabis here on the show to celebrate 420 with us. What's up, Harold? How are
Mm,
you?
I'm good. I'm good. How you doing?
I'm doing so good. What an interesting show you were on.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it was a crazy experience.
Well, I want to dig into it and I want to go over the show and I also really want to talk about what you're doing right now. But first, just so that the listeners can kind of get to know you, because I feel like it makes it so much more fun watching the shows. Can you share where your love of cooking came from and how long you've been cooking for?
Yeah, so I've been cooking professionally for about 14 years now. Started in Hawaii right after I retired from the army. And I always loved cooking. I think my mother said I was cooking when I was a kid, but I would say like professionally. I hate people say I was cooking since the day I was born, as if that's like a possibility. But I've always been fascinated. I would watch Food Network more than ESPN, and I used to have shower interviews and all that, pretending like I was explaining my dish, when I was in high school and stuff like that. And I think my first culinary competition was FCCLA when I was in 12th grade. So that was my first culinary competition, and I just kind of kept running from there.
That is so cool. And what about cooking with cannabis? How long have you been doing that? And how did, tell us your story on how you perfected working with it.
So I began cooking with cannabis about 10 years ago now. I moved to Denver in 2014, right when it was recreationally legalized. And I had a client. I was doing personal chefing before then, and one of my clients was like, "Oh, I would love to learn how to incorporate that into my diet," because she was kind of going through a lot of pains and things like that. And as a retired medic, I think that was a huge thing for me because I stopped using opioids, and I wasn't really using any kind of pain medications outside of ibuprofen. And so cannabis just provided a whole different avenue and allowed me to kind of still function while being able to do something I enjoy and kind of introduce that to others. And so, yeah, I've been using cannabis as far as infusions for the better part of a decade now. And we just released a few things and yeah, just trying to spread into the cannabis food field as much as I can.
It's so interesting. So when we first started chatting and I was going to have you on the show, I hadn't really watched too much of it yet. I was so surprised at so many different forms that you guys used of cannabis and CBD. And
Right.
if you have not, anybody who's listening, if you have not watched it yet, it's such a unique, different type of cooking show for so many different reasons, but it kind of opened my eyes to all of the different forms that are out there. Do you happen to have a favorite form to work with, or do you
Um,
prefer working with CBD over THC?
Actually, I prefer working with THC. I do prefer kind of deriving all of the plant matter and all of the THC for myself. Uh, Distillate and everything like that are easier, obviously, and more readily available the more it becomes legalized throughout the US. But I think that as far as just the old school, kind of getting the full embodiment of the plant and more access to more people, I think flower has kind of always been my go-to. So I prefer it in drink form. I think that it's easier for drinks because of the heat and the temperance. You won't have to usually get it to a point where it starts destroying terpenes and breaking down, thermally breaking down the THC, which is usually above 225. And as we know, boiling point is only 212. And so that really helps out a lot as far as kind of keeping everything nice and homogenated. And also that works for keeping everything at the potency that you set it out to get to. So liquid has always kind of has for the past 3 years kind of been my focus more than anything else.
That's so cool. And I definitely want to talk to you about the drinks that you're making. But I kind of want to introduce your whole show first, and then we can kind of end it with all the fun stuff. So tell me how did auditioning, how did it work? How were you found by
Yeah.
Netflix to do this show, or did you try out?
Yes, so I was reached by a casting company that was kind of searching through different profiles and things like that for cannabis chefs. They reached out to me, and the whole process took about 6 months in total, back and forth, and kind of talking about what was needed and setting up episodes and kind of that whole deal, which was something that I have never really experienced before. Like all the shower interviews and stuff like that didn't really prepare me for like the back, like behind the scenes stuff, and being ushered around set and things like that. But once I found out that I got in, it became just for I think it was a month since until from when I found out to when I went on the show. And my focus was just clarity on my dishes, and my infusions and what I wanted to do and what I thought would be fun, and like, choosing kind of which route I wanted to go, because you weren't really sure of what episodes you'd be on or what they would ask you to make or anything like that. They gave you a rough outline of some of the things, but nothing is concrete. I think they wanted to keep everybody at a fair advantage as far as, being surprised with the theme of the show. Um, but once I was on there, it was I feel like I blacked out like during the cooking part. Like as soon as you're standing there in front of these celebrity judges and these, just the panel of people, and you have to create something, and you you're so focused. I think as a chef, it's just like being in a real kitchen. You get so focused on the dish and the timing and when this should go on and when this should come off, that by the time you realize you're on a show, you're like, oh man, like I totally forgot that that was even a part of this whole thing. So once the judging came up, I was very surprised with that. So yeah.
Well, you did so great. So since you didn't quite know what your challenge was going to be, how were you able, did you do any kind of, yeah, practicing? How did you prepare for the show before you went?
Yeah, so there wasn't much practice. It's one of those things that, at this point, you kind of don't know what um, equipment you're going to have access to and how much time and what they're going to ask you to do. And so it was just more of like a meditation, just kind of getting in your mind that you want to create this. And it's like, I even get to the point where it's like, if this goes wrong, then, I'll do this instead. Or if that goes wrong, I'll do this. But it's just like Mike Tyson says, everybody has a plan until you get punched in the face. And so I definitely, there were some times where I was like, wait, this is burning, or like this isn't good. And so I would just kind of have to step back and just throw that thing away, or I don't have enough time to make this, or whatever. And so just kind of throw that away and start from scratch, which was, I think, more of like just kind of keeping yourself calm was like the hardest part more than anything else.
Yeah, and I love how you had contingency plans if it didn't go well. I ask this question to almost everybody I interview, and you're the first one who said, "Well, I had some contingency plans, or if this goes wrong, I'm going to do this." So really smart. I love that. I love that you were thinking that way.
Yeah, no,
Um,
I've been in catering long enough to know that everything has to have a contingency.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, what I did want to ask, so I kind of want to go through the different dishes that you made, and for anyone who hasn't seen the show, would you agree that it was kind of like it was a weed version of Chopped?
That they wanted to really get across that um pressure was not like the name of the game. It wasn't you trying to be under these time crunches and like making stuff out of stuff you wouldn't have in your kitchen kind of thing. I think for the most part they were very well stocked, they were very well organized, and so it was less pressure, and I really think that that gave us a lot more room to thrive, and it was focused on the dishes. So there was never a point where I felt like, had this person had more time, I would have lost, or had I had more time, I would have done better. It definitely felt more like one of those things that was like, you just make the best that you had. Honestly, I feel like if you would have, been like, I need 5 more minutes, they probably would have given you that.
Oh.
So it was really a very low pressure environment outside of the competition in and of itself.
That is really cool. And since you brought up the what they had for you, the pantry, so to speak, one of my questions for you was going to be about the infused G that you use for your appetizer. Was that something that was in the pantry, or were you infusing things as you were
Uh,
going?
Yeah, so the way that it was essentially kind of worked out is we would have to do our infusions prior. And we had an infusion chef there, and it was all on us to kind of set up what we wanted to infuse, how we wanted to infuse it. But there were very strict guidelines on how much infusion we could use. I think the totality of all three dishes had to be 10 milligrams or less. So, being from Colorado or California or anything like that, you'd be like, that's nothing, that's a square of chocolate. But they were thinking more along the lines of they weren't sure of the bioavailability of everybody's tests. They weren't assured of how many plates the judges were going to have to taste each day. And so they didn't want them, if they had two episodes, that's 120 milligrams, and that can be like a lot for someone who doesn't, recreationally consume cannabis, uh, that in that form. So, we went ahead before and we had like 2 hours maybe or something to kind of infuse our own products. And then we would leave, like label them and leave them on the side. And then when we went to use the for our ingredients and do the infusions, we would have to raise our hand, get a judge to come or get our cannabis specialist to come over and kind of double check how much we were adding to what, and we would show him our infusion and show him the math, and then we'd be able to infuse it. So it was very like very regulated. Honestly, it was more regulated than I've ever seen kind of any food competition where you have to ask a judge before you can execute any part of your dish. So that was interesting, but also it was cool to kind of have that double checking kind of, balance, checks and balances kind of thing going on.
Well, I think it's really smart because in the very first episode, and I know you were on the second episode, but Ricky Lake was on it and she was talking about how her very first time having edibles, she was like had to be carried out of a restaurant. So I
Right.
get that they wanted to like kind of keep it very buttoned up. Can you explain, can you maybe you don't want to give us your secret so to speak, but could you share what you did do in that infusion 2 hours, what you were working with?
Yeah, so I wanted to make sure that so the biggest things you're looking for with infusion is whatever the medium is or the carrier agent is going to be. So you want and different butter has a yield of 85% of the original terpenes and THC content that you'll get from flour. But you go with something like coconut oil or vegetable oils and you're getting close to like 95s, 93s. And so really the question was kind of which part of the plant we're going to use, what form of the plant we're going to use has already been processed. Is it raw flour? Are we doing distillates or waxes? They even had isolates in there, which I think is a little easier to break down for liquid forms and stuff like that. But my biggest thing was just kind of looking at my menu first and then using the cannabis as a seasoning. And so if it was something that was going on a raw grill or something directly over heat, I knew that it couldn't be put on until maybe a little bit later in the process to where that heat wouldn't destroy it. And so, yeah, I kind of, plus I went to show them that there were different ways to infuse it. And I didn't want everybody just to eat can of butter. Like, I think that that's great, but also can of butter because of the fat and the milk byproducts that are in there. If you use raw cannabis, you'll get a lot more of that cannabis flower flavor versus using the ghee, which is why I use the clarified butter, is because it kind of eliminates some of the plant matter taste to it while still retaining all of the THC properties for there. So it didn't lose any of its effectiveness or potency. It just lost a lot of that earthy, grassy flavor to it.
Gotcha. That is so interesting. Did you guys infuse the CBD items that you used as well?
Yeah, so we actually had I forgot the name of the company, but it was a California-based CBD isolate company, and it was in a crystalline powdered form, which usually I forget what they break that down with, but there's some goofy chemical like it's hopefully all natural, but I know that you can break it down with a few different kind of things to get into the crystalline powder form, and they had that already processed because that's essentially the only way that you can get CBD. It's not like cannabis where high amounts of it are found into a single plant that can just be ground up kind of thing. I mean, it can be found in hemp, but that's a whole different processing kind of thing. So for like industrial or any kind of cooking or anything like that, CBD is usually always pre-prepped for you. And so we were just using that just the same way we infuse the THC and the isolates from there.
That's really neat. There's actually a coffee shop here, and I do not live in a legal state, unfortunately, but we do have a coffee shop here that will put CBD in your coffee for you or in your tea, and it is a powder form because, of course,
Right.
I've ordered it and I've tried it. So next, I wanted to ask you about, my God, that appetizer you made with the octopus. Can you share with all of us what that was? Because it looked so amazing.
Yeah, so I was going for a surf and turf, and I have this like I'm not very type A until it comes to like pushing myself on like I think I can get five more things done in this 2 minute period. And so like I know that watching TV, I rarely see octopus. I feel like it's something that even in restaurants, me and my partner just got back from Tulum, and I ordered the pulpo there because I was like, it's octopus, I have to try this. And it was tough, to be kind. And so I know that that's a very easy thing to do is just make a tough octopus. And so I wanted to kind of do something that not only showed that I could pair good flavors, but I actually had a lot of really well like execution when it comes to harder products. So I chose steak and octopus, two things that are notoriously overcooked, and especially under a time constraint, I thought that'd be fun. And so I had a friend who used to work at a restaurant here in Denver, and I was there, and this was before I found out about this show, and they had this black sauce that they paired with a crudo, um, and it was like it was burnt onions and it had like squid ink, and it was like slightly different, but it was just so strikingly dark, and it reminded me of like a mole with like lighter flavors. And so I kind of wanted to go for something like that. I wanted a surf and turf, to represent West Africa. And I know that there was a lot of octopus and like things like that that aren't really commonly used. And so I just kind of went for it. And fortunately they liked it because, when they've been to it and they say it was well done, my heart dropped because I thought they meant like, this is, overly done. So I was like, oh, that one failed. But fortunately that wasn't the case.
Well, and it's interesting too because one of the judges had mentioned, and they showed a picture of the octopus, so I assume this is what he meant, but that he was trying different things, that you had made different ingredients like the octopus perhaps more accessible. And so do you
Right.
find that people are more willing to try these ingredients that maybe they wouldn't typically order off of a menu because they know it's dosed?
Yeah, I do think it's one of those things where you kind of think about it as, yeah, I also like, I think like you said, because it's those people are like, I don't want to waste this, it's like I have to try this, and it's like when you have a prefixed menu and you're just like, well, this whole thing was $200. I'll be damned if I don't eat one of these things, um so I think that like the people did have that, and I think with food it's a very, you're really asking someone to trust you, like not just like not get sick or not, you're asking someone to trust you when they go, I don't really like onions. Are there onions in this? And you're like, yeah, but like, what don't you like about onions? It's like, it's the textures, the flavors, like some of those things I can mitigate, and some of those things are just my favorite part. And so I try to accentuate them, a lot in this dish. And so, I think that having that, and also there's the cameras there. No one wants to be that guy who's like, yucky, like, I'm not eating this. Like, oh, look, you can still see the suction cups, like people, no one wants to hear that from a food judge. And I think that that was like a thing that they were kind of like, okay, well, like I have to judge this dish. And so once they tried it, I was grateful for, I think Haha Davis was really enjoying it. And I think that was one of those things I was like, oh, cool. Like I never really thought of forcing people. I have an 8-year-old. So when someone says they don't want to eat something, I just drop it, I'm just like, fine, I'm not going to make that then. Yeah.
Then it's not for you. I get
Right.
it. Well, I did want to ask a little bit about how many milligrams were in each dish, but I feel like you've kind of already covered that. But what about the math? Because for me, I mean, I'm familiar enough as, somebody who used to live in California on edibles and THC and CBD in general, but you guys had, how do you do the math? How do you figure that out? Because I was so blown away by that.
Yeah, so fortunately they did do, I'll give them this. just I will say that Netflix did their due diligence insofar as the research for the products they provided us. So we had here in Colorado, we work with what's called metrics, and metrics is what lists every percentage. You have to get everything that you send out of your shop tested. You know, like flour, like edibles, no matter what it is, if it has cannabis in it, it has to be tested. And so they gave us those printouts with exactly how much CBD, CBG, CBN, CBG, how much THC activated was already in there, and how much THC, raw was in there. And so no matter what product it was. And so it was up to you. So you could say, I want to use 4 different types of flour, plus an isolate, plus a distillate, and one wax. And they're like, fine. But if you use all of those in one dish, or if you use, then it's going to be microscopic because it can only get to about 2 milligrams. And so I would usually just kind of go for one. And the math is just the same as the math that you would kind of find online, where you take how many milligrams of, and how much of that product you're using versus how much carrier agent you're using, divide that by the serving size, and then, there you go. And so with that, they, like I said, they were checking everything. So even when you're portioning it, you would have, ramekin this big or whatever you would keep it in. And that whole entire ramekin was 24 milligrams. And so by the time you were done, you should have some left over, and they'd come and they'd kind of check it and weigh it, and then they throw it away. So it was very, very like titrated. And just kind of, I think that was like one of the parts that I love the most, is just being able to sit there and kind of flex the science and math side of everything. Because it's just so easy for people to be like, this is about 150 milligrams. And you're just like, oh my God, like that was what Colorado started off as in the beginning. Everybody wanted 1,000 milligram meals, and people were leaving as if they had went to a wine tasting and took in, taken 3 to 4 bottles. Um, and I don't think that was the point of those wine tastings. The same way I don't think that's the point of cannabis dinners.
No, definitely not. Now, I was looking for you guys testing your food as you go, because as a cook and as somebody who's competed on these types of shows as well, you're always, you must test everything, test everything. Were you testing everything? And if so, how were you able to keep your composure throughout the entire challenge?
Yeah. Well, fortunately, the entirety of the shoot, I think it was a 30-minute round, and then there were two 30-minute rounds and a 60-minute round. So all in all, it was about 2 hours of shooting. But with the way I kind of kept, yes, I would taste everything, but I also got to the point to where I started putting, kind of making my cannabis things on the side, and then if it was like a vinaigrette or something like that, I would taste it first and then add it, and then just taste like the bit of it afterwards. Because yeah, just kind of going in and tasting it every time is a good way to get very sleepy very early in the competition.
Yeah, the whole time I'm like, man, how are they all still standing there? I get that the
Yeah.
judges at least are seated, but yeah, that's so interesting and very smart way to do it too. And then you made that rack of lamb. Oh my God.
Mm.
Can you tell me about that? Because one of the judges loved it so much that there were anybody who hasn't seen it, he like grabbed some of it and ran off with it. And there's like a rack of lamb bone sticking out of like a planter on the side. Can you
Right.
tell me about that and how you made it? And it just looks so delicious.
Yeah. Well, once again, like I feel like when it's like for a competition, you just want to bring everything you got. Like you kind of want to go like, yes, I can make, pretty much anything delicious. If sources are good and stuff like that. But I think that was going for things that are often seen on TV shows to be messed up, and they're just like, man, like you overcooked this, or this was like, if you'd had 10 more minutes, this pasta would have been perfect or whatever. And so when it came down to the rack of lamb, there was like this old thing that it's just kind of a normal chef, but when you have like a smaller rack of lamb, you always want to cut into double cut pieces because it'll then be that thick instead of that, and you run a lower risk of overcooking everything. So yeah, I just kind of wanted to do that, and I wanted everything to be very African. So I went for like a Ras Al Hanout, which is like an Egyptian style spice blend. Kind of America's answer would be like Old Bay, I guess. And so I coated that, and then I threw that on the grill, and that helped like that. I mean, it was the fire and everything kind of got those warm spices in there. And then I added a little bit, so I did half of it before and then half of my infusion after. And that's what kind of helped me to retain how much THC was in there, even with the fire kind of taking some of the potency down a bit.
Wow, and it just looked so amazing, so delicious. I'm hungry just thinking about it right now. And then your third dish was a dessert. So do you see where
Right.
I'm like getting
Yep.
these?
Yep.
Oh, it sounds like chopped.
Right.
Can you tell me about the dessert that you
Yeah.
made?
Yes. So for desserts are always to me, like to when I when I cater, I prep the dessert beforehand, so it's just like chopped and then like plated and all that kind of stuff. But I couldn't do that here, and so that kind of was one of those things where I was like, you can't take the first round to do desserts, like or like prep desserts, like you only get that 45 minutes to do that. So I needed to make something that I knew I could make that I've made before, like not something like, oh, I haven't made this since culinary school. Like it had to be something that was like a workhorse kind of recipe. So I was kind of researching, and this was the day before, and I was just kind of thinking, like, man, what would be something that was like, eye popping? And I was reading lore in the Azulu with like the lightning bird, which is kind of a familiar to witches, I guess what we would consider witches. And I just thought the story behind it was so cool. It's just this lightning bird, and if you caught its egg, you would like become immortal. But it was like so fast, and like that there was no point, no chance. And so I kind of went with a puff pastry, and then I did a creme anglaise and on the inside. And then inside of that, I did a passion fruit curd, so it kind of looked like an egg when you cut into it. My only regret is if I had to do over again, I'd make the curd a little bit thicker and the inside a little bit thicker, so it kind of act like more of a pat de choux. Um, but yeah, it was good. Like it was nice. Like I wanted it to be a little bigger and bolder, and I wanted it, in a perfect world, it would have had a little nest or something, something cool like that. But it's just one of those things where I was like, I am happy that I got this done in 45 minutes.
Well, I thought it looked great, and I love that there was a story behind it because by then the judges had already had a decent amount of THC, so a little story with it just makes it seem more whimsical and fun and
Right.
definitely, lends to that high a little bit. I thought it was really charming and fun, and yeah, I loved it.
Ah, thank you.
I absolutely loved it. And then you won. So sorry,
Right.
spoiler alert, anybody. You won. And well, I do want to ask how you celebrated, but first I want to tell you that you you kind of broke down and you had this very vulnerable moment that I just you it was so lovable and sweet and honest. And can you kind of share what happened when you found out that you won and what was going through your head at that time?
Um, yeah, so okay. I was sweating bullets, like, because they do this thing where you leave the room and they're like the judges are going to discuss everything, and so you're just kind of sitting in the green room talking about, yeah, that was crazy, like I don't know, like like these people are your competition, but also like your newfound friends, and so you're not like really in a competition with them. You're just kind of like, yo, I think that the thing you made was amazing, and then you did this. And then they call you back in, you stand on your marker, and as you're waiting, I just started like sweating, and I just could not like say it. And then they do this thing where they go, and the winner is, and they're just like, huh, and they go back into their earpiece talking to the back, and you're like, oh God.
No.
Like it's you're just standing there waiting for them to like, they're like, okay, yeah, yeah. All right, well, okay. And the win what's that? And you're just like, oh my God. So like by the time like it was just like this build up, and by the time they said it, I I didn't know, I didn't have words. Like there was no thought. It was like the shock of hearing your name said. You're like, and there was nothing that went through my head. Like I wish that was like, I thought like, oh, I can't call it, wait to call this person or do this and like show. There was nothing in there except for just like, I can't believe I won. I was like, I won, and it's like, did he? And even like hugging, Brandon and Melissa and Khalees, and like everybody was just so nice and so just like welcoming, that when it happened, I was trying to hug everybody who was near me, like just like, cameraman, come here. It's like, by the time it ended, I left, and and everyone's super sweet, and they're just super gracious. So they're just like, oh, congratulations, like it was so great, and like blah blah blah. And so they did 2 episodes at a time. So episode 1 and 2 we would shoot on the same day, and then episode 3 and 4 would shoot on the same day, and so forth. And so you would be kind of like grouped with the people from episode 1. And so afterwards, we left and we go to the hotel, and me, Chef Amanda, and Cynthia Shishido, which is a legend in my book. She's the reason Top Chef was created, was around Cynthia Shishido. And so we're sitting at the restaurant or the hotel bar, just throwing back beers and whiskeys, and I was just like, I was in awe, because I get to like these are, and it was crazy because like no one else, like everyone else was just like, yeah, man, like I don't know, like it was just something I went to come on, like I thought it'd be kind of cool, but for me, I was like, no, this is like big. And so just being able to sit there with these like people that I consider like peers, but also like legends, it was just kind of crazy. Like, and Cynthia is just one of the coolest, down to earth, and she was Jay-Z and Beyonce's chef for a long while, like, and she spends most of her time in the Hamptons, and so she was just like giving me all kinds of knowledge, and it was incredible, like honestly.
Oh, that's so great. And are you still in contact with anybody from the show?
Yeah, so I still talk to Chef Amanda, and Chef Nate Santana. He It was strange because about a month before I went on the show, I was reading through a magazine, and they were talking about up and coming chefs, and I flipped these pages, and I see his page, and he has a chicken brined and then like roasted, and has these tiny pickled okras that just are all over it, so it just looked gorgeous. And I was like, oh my God, this guy's insane. And then he was on this episode, and I literally told him, I was like, if I was on the same episode, I'm not sure how this would have turned out. Like, I'm not saying I would have lost, but I'm not sure what would have happened. Like, the guy's got talent. And so it's just one of those things that kind of I was taken aback by the fact that I was able to sit with these people and like commune and like not feel like I was like the underdog kind of thing, you know?
Yeah. Well, you're one of those people now. Now you're going to be the one sitting at a bar and somebody's going to say, "Oh my God, you won't believe it. I sat next to Harold Sims." So that's going to be you now. I have no doubt. I have no doubt.
I
Um,
appreciate that.
what have you been doing since the show? Because I've been on your social media, and please give us your social media handles as well, but and then tell us what you're working on right now because it looks big.
Oh yeah, so my social media is going to be Harold for Hire, and it's Higher, and all platforms, and also Drink Maloko, Meloko. And Maloko is Sesothian, which is a South African language, but it's essentially tribal or generational. So it's just kind of, I want to create something that like went for a while, and so, like I said, drinks were kind of my preferred consumption of it, especially getting out of the army and things like that. I tried to limit how much alcohol I was drinking, wasn't really agreeing with me. And so I started a company of instant fruit teas. So they're just fruit teas that you add to water. And so we have 3 flavors right now. We have lychee, passion fruit, we have raspberry, lemon, basil, and then we have white peach pomegranate. And so what we want to do is kind of take flavors that like from my kind of travels and like the chefy kind of parts of my life, and infuse them into something that was good and didn't taste like THC. Because I love THC, but the taste of it, and the taste of kind of terpenes and stuff like that can be a little overpowering in any setting. So we just kind of want to make that. We did that. We're in coming up on 10 stores here in Denver now. And it's just little by little. But we recently entered the Rooster Magazine THC Classic, and we won first place for beverages and dissolvables. So that was cool. Yeah, that was something that kind of another moment where I was like, I have all this stuff in my head. I'm like, oh man, I'm gonna say the coolest thing, and it's gonna like somebody's recorded, it's become like a meme or somewhere. Somebody's like, like this is how you're cool, and it never works that way. I get on stage and I just start like, I'll ramble about thanking someone for like 10 seconds and be like, man, like what else do I say? And then when I can't think of anything, I'll be like, thank you, and thank you for supporting me, and then just like walk away. Like, so it definitely was not as not it was the same as the Netflix thing. Where it was like 2 to 3 words came out. The rest of it was like mumbling tears. So
No, I thought you did so great on Netflix, and you were so much fun to watch. And anyone who is listening or watching on YouTube, definitely check it out. It's called Cooked with Cannabis. It's on Netflix, and you are on episode 2. Is that correct?
that's correct.
And
Yep.
where can we can do you guys ship your drinks, or is it only in Denver?
Yeah, so it's only in Colorado right now. We are
Okay.
spread throughout Denver, and then we're like in the surrounding areas. So within like about 2 to 3 hours outside of Denver, you should be able to find them. But our website is being updated. We have the first 7 dispensaries. We're adding more every day that we have to keep adding. I keep saying we from the corporate standpoint. It's more like the Queen's we. It's just me doing a lot of this work. It's like the royal we, you know? It's like the country of Harold. Um, oh yeah, so kind of getting that together, and it's we've got nothing but positive feedback, but it's also a very tight market. You have to kind of show people that you're there and like let them know what it tastes like and stuff like that, and then they'll decide for themselves. If it's good, it's good, and it'll stand on its own.
I love that. And I can't wait till you start, shipping and putting it in more locations. So, have you done any other cooking reality shows, or is there anything in the works?
I've done one other food competition show. It was on Food Network. It was called Supermarket Stakeout. The only reason that I'm kind of I don't know what's the reason, but I was on season 2 or 3. But the episode's called Carnivores Unite. I'll spoil this one now just because I can't find it. Like if you go on Food Network, if you go on foodnetwork.com, they have every season except for the one that me and a friend of mine, Dave Hadley from Denver, were also on. And I don't want to speculate on why. I have no idea why. Like it wasn't one of those things where they sent me a letter, but I always go on these wild like conspiracy theories, like, well, maybe like if you look in the background of that one, there's like the California Strangler, and like they had to remove the whole thing or something. Like I have no idea why they did that. But it's on a supermarket stakeout. And that one's somewhere in the universe. I've looked everywhere for it, but I can't find that one. And then I was on a show that's on Hy-Vee called Wake and Bake with Dom Kennedy. Don Kennedy. He's a really cool traveling musician. And he just kind of came through Denver, just kind of talked about different like cannabis issues and stuff like that. And I just kind of cooked a meal for him and Wanda James and like a few other people who were there, really, really great business owners in Denver. And so, yeah, it's cannabis has been like, I've been fortunate enough to kind of explore a lot of avenues because of cannabis. And to live in a legal state. Like there was never a part when I was in the army or before that where I thought to myself that cannabis could be anything other than just kind of a recreational, once in a while kind of thing for me. And the older I got, the more I was like, wow, this could actually be something that not only is, profitable, but something I use all the time. There's not a day that goes by that I don't use it. And it stopped me from being able to take opioids, which was perfect. I couldn't really, they weren't affecting my body well. And, I was done using them 2 months after I retired, and I never re-upped my prescription since. And so, yeah, this cannabis has just kind of been a saving grace in a lot of ways for me.
That is so great. That's so, so great. Thank you so much for making time for us. And I know you've been so busy. So for anybody listening, it was hard to make both of our schedules work. So thank you so, so much for carving out some time for us.
Of
And
course, I
as I say
appreciate it.
us, as in the royal us, just like you were saying the royal we, it's just me.
Of course.
For now. Well, thank you so much, Harold. Is there anything else that you wanted to plug or talk about, or anything else that was important to you wanted to share here on the podcast?
Um, no, I think that I think just to finish out, I am very grateful for the opportunities that I have been given as far as or that I've kind of made in some cases, been given in others. with cannabis. But I think that it's one of those things that if you are, and this is just kind of a general, but if you are trying to do any business, and you feel like it might be oversaturated or you don't have enough capital or whatever it is, I will say that there's always some way. And this isn't coming from, the guy who's like, that $10,000 that you win after taxes is about $7,200. And they had to keep reshooting the part at the end where they asked what you're going to do with it because my answers were too boring because they were just paying bills. And I was like, I got a son, so like we might do something. But honestly, after I pay bills and like close a couple of credit cards, like it might be another thousand left over. And they're just like, we need something better than that. And so I started talking some kind of weird shit that they were just kind of like, okay, that's not gonna work either, man. So it was like so none of that money was able to be used for that. And so it was truly one of those shoestring budget kind of things. So I would say that if you have an idea, reach out to someone, learn how to protect yourself in your IP and your ideas, and don't just kind of give them to everybody. And even if you trust them, and if so, maybe get something signed. But there's a way. Like there are sources online, there are people in real life. Like there are. I mean, you can hit me up on IG. Like, there are tons of DMs of people asking me, I want to do this, and like, how did you start, and how can I do that? And like, I'm open. Like, my DMs are open. Like, if you want to kind of ask me anything about food or anything like that, it's Harold for Hire. And I'll respond. I won't promise it'll be quickly, but I promise it will be eventually. So yeah, just get out there and keep trying it. Like, there's no one to stop you but you. And I know that sounds kind of cliche, but that's the genuine truth. Like you can partner with people. There are white label deals. You might not get 100% of your profits. You might in the beginning only take 10 to 15, honestly, but that's, if you can work that up to $1 million a year, 10 to 15% is not going to be such a hassle anymore.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. That's such great advice. Thank you so, so much.
quite welcome.
Everyone make sure to check out Harold for Hire on Instagram, and is it also TikTok, Facebook, all of those?
I'm Chef Harold on TikTok. Not much on there yet. I am getting closer to 40, and so I find myself becoming very annoyed with trying to put up TikToks.
Yeah, me
But I
too.
have to. It's a thing now. It's a thing. So
Awesome. And I will make sure to put everything in the show notes. So if you're in the car and listening right now, don't worry, I've got you. We'll make sure we've got everything in the show notes for you. Well, thank you so much for making time for us, Harold. It's been an honor to talk to you. You're so much fun to watch on TV. I hope to see you on more things and to watch your continued success.
thanks so much, Audrey. I appreciate this.
Oh, of course, of course. Thanks everyone for listening. Make sure to check out Harold's social media and his websites, everything in the show notes, and make sure to tune into the next episode of Who's Reality Cooking. Bye.